They thought they had where three corrupt cops, smirking in court, watched their meticulously fabricated case against Danielle Ross unfold. A black woman, framed, her reputation publicly annihilated. But as their triumph turned to smug celebration, Danielle rose, a quiet force in an orange suit, to deliver a truth that shattered the courtroom's reality. With a badge flash and 2 words, she flipped the script, transforming their victory into their downfall and exposing a deep-seated network of crime. The air in the courtroom was a suffocating blanket, heavy with the weight of accusation. Danielle Ross, a beacon of defiant calm in her striking orange suit, occupied the defendant's chair. Every lens, every eye in the packed gallery was fixed on her, dissecting her stillness, anticipating the moment she might break. This was not a trial, it was a public execution of reputation, a meticulously orchestrated spectacle designed for maximum impact. Across the polished oak, Detectives Miller, Hayes, and Sergeant Davies radiated an almost palpable glee, their low, conspiratorial laughter, a constant undercurrent to the hushed murmurs, was a calculated performance of disdain. They were the architects of this downfall, the masters of a system they had perverted, and their confidence was absolute. Their target, Danielle Ross, a black woman, an inconvenient truth standing in the path of their shadowy enterprise. She was to be annihilated, her influence systematically dismantled. Mark Jenkins, the young prosecutor, a figure of slick ambition, paced before the jury, his voice, honed to a razor's edge, cut through the tension, weaving a narrative of cunning and corruption. He painted Danielle as the architect of an intricate fraud, a criminal mastermind pulling strings from the shadows. Each word was a meticulously placed brick in the wall of her conviction. He presented what appeared to be irrefutable evidence, forged documents, doctored financial records, and coerced testimonies, all meticulously crafted by the corrupt trio to implicate her in a vast network of embezzlement, obstruction, and racketeering. The sheer volume of the fabricated evidence was overwhelming, a tidal wave of lies threatening to drown her. Danielle remained an enigma, her expression a mask of granite. She absorbed the relentless assault, the thinly veiled racial slights woven into Jenkins's portrayal of her as an aggressive, untrustworthy figure. She watched the jury, their faces a canvas of doubt, suspicion, and a creeping sense of inevitability. The media, a ravenous beast, devoured every syllable, their cameras flashing like predatory eyes. Each flash was a blow, hammering home the public image of a disgraced official. This was the corrupt officer's true objective, not just a verdict, but a public obliteration, a complete shattering of her professional and personal standing. Sergeant Davies, his gaze a predatory gleam, caught Danielle's eye and offered a slow, deliberate wink, a gesture of absolute contempt and triumph. Miller and Hayes mirrored his smug satisfaction. They had built this case with surgical precision, twisting every legitimate interaction Danielle had, every professional connection, into a sinister thread in their fabricated web. They had planted incriminating digital footprints, coerced false witnesses, and leveraged their deep-seated connections within the police force to ensure every legal avenue for Danielle was blocked. The judge, Judge Albright, a woman whose stern features held a hint of fatigue, observed the proceedings with a detached air, as if the conclusion was already written, the scales of justice irrevocably tipped. The courtroom pressed in, a crucible of directed malice. Witness after witness, paraded by the prosecution, added another layer to the manufactured deception. A jittery accountant testified to phantom transactions. A visibly intimidated former colleague recounted distorted conversations, twisting Danielle's innocuous words into damning confessions. The gallery shifted, a restless sea of humanity, their collective judgment swayed by the compelling, albeit false, narrative. Tom, they saw a criminal, not a victim, a black woman, ensnared by her own alleged ambition, finally facing justice, a narrative that confirmed their preconceived notions, The air crackled with the unspoken bias that her very presence in a position of power was an anomaly, inherently suspicious. Danielle's public defender, a man clearly outmatched and overwhelmed, offered only weak objections and ineffective cross-examinations. He was a lone, struggling figure against a relentless tide of rehearsed lies in a system designed to crush his client. The corrupt officers had ensured Danielle was utterly isolated, vulnerable, and without a legitimate defense. This public humiliation, this deliberate targeting of her character and identity, was designed to break her spirit, to leave her with no hope of recovery, even if by some miracle she evaded conviction. The true team was to render her powerless, to silence her voice forever. The tension in the room was a living entity, coiling tighter with each passing minute, each damning piece of testimony, pushing Danielle to the precipice. The officers' smug grins widened, a silent, chilling celebration of their imminent victory. The prosecutor, Mark Jenkins, concluded his opening statement with a flourish, a theatrical gesture towards Danielle. The evidence, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, will show beyond a shadow of a doubt that Danielle Ross is not the esteemed public servant she pretends to be, but a cunning criminal who abused her position for personal gain. He then rested his case for the morning, the implicit message hanging heavy in the air: guilty. The courtroom broke into a low hum of chatter, the media scurrying to capture the moment, their cameras flashing like incessant bursts of lightning. Sergeant Davies, emboldened by the perceived success of the prosecution's opening, leaned back in his chair, a wide, triumphant grin stretching across his face. He caught Danielle's eye again, this time raising his hand in a slow, mock salute, a gesture dripping with condescension. Detectives Miller and Hayes snickered beside him. They believed they had won, that their meticulously crafted web of lies had fully ensnared her. The judge, Judge Albright, announced a short recess before the defense would present their opening. Danielle's public defender, a man named Mr. Harrison, seemed to shrink further into his worn suit. His shoulders slumped. He approached Danielle, his voice a low, despairing murmur. Danielle, to show him, look, I know this is rough, but we don't have much to work with. Their evidence is comprehensive. We need to start thinking about a plea bargain. His words were a physical blow, a confirmation of the hopelessness that the corrupt officers had so carefully manufactured around her. He saw her as a lost cause, a pawn in a game rigged against her. His defeatism was palpable, a final push towards the abyss. A cold certainty settled over Danielle. This was it, the moment she had anticipated, the moment where the system, designed to protect, was being used to destroy. She met Mr. Harrison's gaze, her eyes holding a resolve that had surprised him. No plea bargain, Mr. Harrison, she stated, her voice calm, devoid of any tremor of fear. We play this out. Just then, a commotion erupted at the back of the courtroom. Two sharply dressed individuals, their faces grim, pushed their way through the throng of reporters, their eyes scanning the room with an intensity that brooked no argument. They moved with a silent authority that commanded attention, a stark contrast to the casual chaos of the recess. They were too disciplined, too focused to be mere spectators. Sergeant Davies, still basking in his perceived victory, turned to see what the fuss was about. His smirk faltered. Miller and Hayes stiffened, a flicker of unease crossing their faces. The two newcomers, a man and a woman, moved with purpose towards Danielle. The man, tall and imposing, whispered something to the woman, who nodded curtly. They positioned themselves, one on each side of the public defender's table, their presence radiating an undeniable power. Danielle stood slowly, her orange suit a vibrant splash against the somber backdrop of the courtroom. The judge, about to leave the bench for recess, paused, sensing the sudden shift in the atmosphere. The hum of chatter died down, replaced by a tense silence. All eyes were on Danielle, and the two enigmatic figures now standing beside her. Danielle's gaze swept across the room, lingering on the smug faces of Miller, Hayes, and Davies. The confident smirk had vanished from Davies's face, replaced by a frown of confusion, then a dawning horror. Miller and Hayes exchanged uneasy glances, a tremor of doubt finally entering their hardened expressions. The man beside Danielle leaned in and handed her a small, metallic badge. She held it up, the silver emblem glinting under the fluorescent lights. Her voice, clear and resonant, cut through the silence, each word landing with the precision of a hammer blow. "Mr. Jenkins," she began, addressing the stunned prosecutor, "and to the esteemed court. I believe there has been a significant misunderstanding regarding my identity." She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle, allowing the badge to reflect the light, catching the eye of every person in the room. The public defender, Mr. Harrison, gasped, a strangled sound of disbelief. The two individuals who had entered the courtroom now stood ramrod straight, their eyes fixed on Danielle's gun. "Ready." Then, Danielle spoke the words that would shatter the courtroom's complacency, words that would send a shockwave through the national media present, words that would irrevocably alter the course of justice and revenge. Her voice, though calm, vibrated with an authority that left no room for doubt. "My name is Danielle Ross, and I am the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation." The words hung in the air, echoing off the high ceilings, transforming the courtroom into a landscape of stunned, frozen faces. The judge's eyes widened, her gavel forgotten. The corrupt officer's triumphant smiles disintegrated, replaced by expressions of utter disbelief and dawning terror. The collective gasp from the gallery was almost deafening. The cameras, for a moment, were still, their flashes momentarily forgotten, as if even they needed to process the seismic shift. The pronouncement hung in the air, a physical force that silenced every breath, every murmur. "Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation." The words echoed in the sudden vacuum, stripping away the courtroom's carefully constructed reality. For a beat, an eternity, no one moved. Then, chaos. Sergeant Davies's face, a moment ago a mask of smug triumph, contorted into a grotesque caricature of disbelief. His jaw went slack, his eyes wanted bloodshot. Detectives Miller and Hayes, equally stunned, mirrored his horror. Their bravado evaporated, replaced by a dawning, sickening realization of their colossal mistake. The laughter, the smirks, the casual contempt, it all crashed down on them, turning their faces ashen. Mark Jenkins, the prosecutor, initially stared at Danielle, but then his lips parted in disbelief. He had just delivered a scathing opening statement, painting her as a criminal. His professional ambition, his entire career, flashed before his eyes, now teetering on the precipice of utter ruin. He stammered, "Objection, Your Honor. This is preposterous, a blatant attempt to derail proceedings." His voice, usually so confident, wavered, betraying the sudden, paralyzing fear that gripped him. He knew, instinctively, that this was no bluff. Judge Albright, her face pale, gripped the edges of her bench. Her initial shock gave way to a flicker of profound understanding. She had sensed something was amiss, a deep undercurrent of injustice beneath the prosecution's flawless presentation. Now, the full extent of the deception became horrifyingly clear. She slammed her gavel, the sharp crack echoing through the suddenly silent room. "Order, order in this court." Danielle ignored Jenkins, her gaze locked onto the three officers. Her calm demeanor was now infused with an undeniable authority, a quiet power that had been hidden in plain sight. "Preposterous. Mr. Jenkins," she countered, her voice resonating with cool precision. "Or simply inconvenient for those who abuse their sworn duty." She gestured to the two individuals who had entered the courtroom with her. "Agents, secure the premises." The two FBI agents, who had been standing silently by the defense table, moved with fluid, professional speed. One, a burly man with an unyielding expression, moved to block the main exit, his eyes sweeping the room, assessing every potential threat. The other, a sharp-featured woman, swiftly approached the prosecutor's table, her hand already on the shoulder of a stunned Jenkins. "Mr. Jenkins," she stated, her voice low but firm, "you are advised to remain silent and await further instructions. Obstruction of a federal investigation carries severe penalties." Davies, recovering slightly from his shock, attempted to bluster. "This is insane. You can't just barge in here and declare yourself the FBI director. This is a state court. We have jurisdiction." His voice was a desperate, high-pitched plea, utterly devoid of his earlier arrogance. Miller and Hayes, though terrified, tried to stand their ground, their hands instinctively moving towards their holstered weapons, then freezing as they remembered they were in a courtroom. Under the direct gaze of armed federal agents, Danielle took a step forward, her presence dominating the space. "Jurisdiction, Sergeant Davies?" Her tone was laced with icy contempt. "My office has been investigating your corrupt little enterprise for the past 18 months. Your attempts to frame me were merely the final, arrogant confirmation of your culpability." She held up the badge again, letting the FBI seal catch the light. "This is not a declaration, Sergeant. This is an official action. My agents are already securing your precinct, your homes, and your offshore accounts." The words hit the three officers like a physical blow, their faces drained of all color. Offshore accounts. That specific detail, known only to the Miem and their closest conspirators, confirmed the terrifying scope of Danielle's operation, the sheer audacity of their attempt to frame her. The director of the FBI now appeared not as cunning, but as suicidal folly. Davies swayed slightly, as if struck. Miller looked ready to vomit. Hayes, the youngest and most naive, began to tremble visibly. The public in the gallery, initially confused, gasped as the implications of Danielle's words fully registered. A federal sting operation. The public prosecution of the FBI director was a smokescreen, a trap. Judge Albright, regaining her composure, pounded her gavel again. "Silence, Director Ross. If this is indeed your official capacity, then the court defers to federal jurisdiction. Sergeant Davies, Detectives Miller and Hayes, you are advised that you are now under federal investigation. Any attempt to flee or obstruct will be met with immediate force." Her voice, though shaken, held its judicial authority. She had seen countless dramas unfold in her courtroom, but nothing prepared her for this seismic shift. The power dynamic had flipped in an instant, leaving the corrupt officers exposed and vulnerable, their carefully constructed world crumbling around them. The courtroom erupted. Not with shouts, but with a collective, stunned silence, then a chaotic swell of murmurs and the frantic clicking of cameras. Sergeant Davies, his face a mask of abject terror, scrambled backwards, bumping into the railing behind him. His eyes darted around the room, a desperate animal trapped in a corner. Miller and Hayes, paralyzed by the sudden reversal of fortune, stared blankly, their earlier arrogance completely obliterated. The air, once thick with their smug confidence, was now heavy with their panic. "On your feet, Sergeant Davies, Detectives Miller and Hayes." Danielle's voice cut through the burgeoning noise, cool and commanding. Her gaze, once reserved, now bore the weight of federal authority. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to obstruct justice, racketeering, and gross misconduct in public office." She turned to her agents. "Agent Thompson, Jen Davis, proceed with the arrests, secure their personal effects, and ensure no communication devices are active." Agent Thompson, the burly man, moved with surprising speed. He was on Sergeant Davies before the corrupt officer could even register the command. Davies let out a strangled cry, a pathetic sound compared to his earlier boasts. Thompson efficiently cuffed him, a snap of metal echoing in the shocked silence. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Thompson recited the Miranda warning, his voice a steady drone of professionalism that underscored Davies's rapid descent into helplessness. Hayes, the youngest, finally snapped. He lurched forward, a wild look in his eyes, as if intending to physically attack Danielle before he could take a second step. Anna Davis, the sharp-featured woman, intercepted him with a swift, practiced move, twisting his arm behind his back and forcing him to his knees. Hayes cried out, a mix of pain and outrage. Miller, seeing his colleague subdued so effortlessly, visibly deflated, raising his hands in a gesture of pathetic surrender as Agent Thompson moved to cuff him next. The courtroom was a maelstrom of activity. The media, initially stunned into stillness, now surged forward, their cameras flashing relentlessly, capturing every agonizing moment of the officer's humiliation. Reporters shouted questions, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of urgency. Director Ross, is this a pre-planned sting operation? What about the charges against you? Are there more arrests to come? Danielle remained unperturbed, a pillar of composure amidst the unfolding chaos. She turned to Judge Albright and Your Honor, I apologize for the unconventional nature of this operation, given the depth of corruption within the local precinct and the sensitivity of the investigation. Maintaining full secrecy was paramount. We couldn't risk tipping off the perpetrators. Judge Albright, her face still pale but regaining a semblance of authority, nodded slowly. Understood. Director Ross, this court will cooperate fully with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Bailiffs, assist the federal agents in maintaining order. Several uniformed bailiffs, who had been standing by, bewildered, now moved to assist the FBI agents in corralling the increasingly agitated crowd and ensuring no one interfered with the arrests. Meanwhile, more FBI agents, silent and efficient, streamed into the courtroom from the main doors, establishing a perimeter. They moved with a military precision that left no doubt as to their authority. Some agents immediately began securing the courtroom, moving to the prosecutor's table, confiscating the evidence presented earlier. Mark Jenkins, the prosecutor, stood frozen, his face a ghastly shade of green. Agent Davis, still beside him, removed his phone from his belt. We'll be needing this, Mr. Jenkins, and any other electronic devices. You will be escorted to a secure location for questioning. Jenkins could only nod, his voice lost. He was no longer the confident prosecutor, but a man whose entire worldview had just been shattered, his career hanging by a thread. Davies, now fully cuffed and being led away by Agent Thompson, snarled, You won't get away with this, Ross. We have allies. You think this is the end? This is just the beginning. His defiance was a weak, pathetic roar, the last gasp of a cornered beast. Danielle met his gaze, her eyes cold. It's the beginning of the end for your network, Sergeant, and it starts with you. As Davies, Miller, and Hayes were physically escorted out of the courtroom, their faces etched with despair and defeat, the public gallery erupted into a mixture of gasps, whispers, and a few scattered shouts of justice. The media scrum intensified, their flashes like a continuous strobe light. The narrative had flipped irrevocably. The accused had become the accuser, and the seemingly untouchable had been brought to their knees. The tension in the room was electric, shifting from apprehension to a powerful surge of vindication. The corrupt officer's world had not just crumbled, it had spectacularly imploded under the weight of Danielle's audacious revelation. The chaotic energy in the courtroom pulsed, a tangible force radiating from the spot where the three disgraced officers had just been led away. The cacophony of camera flashes and shouted questions was deafening. The public gallery, a moment ago a sea of skeptical faces, now buzzed with a mixture of shock, vindication, and eager anticipation. Justice, raw and sudden, had just been served. Danielle Ross, now undeniably the director of the FBI, stood at the defense table, no longer a defendant but the orchestrator of a meticulously executed takedown. Her orange suit, once a symbol of her supposed criminality, now shone with a defiant brilliance. She surveyed the scene, her gaze unwavering, absorbing the raw emotion. Judge Albright, her face still etched with the residual shock of the revelation, recovered her composure. She struck her gavel once more, a forceful blow that momentarily quieted the room. "The court is adjourned for the day," she announced, her voice firm. "All evidence presented by the prosecution is hereby sealed and transferred to federal custody. All individuals involved in this initial hearing are to cooperate fully with federal agents." As the judge departed, the media scrum intensified, converging on Danielle. Microphones were thrust forward. Cameras jostled for position. "Director Ross, what is the full extent of this operation? How long have you been undercover? Are there more corrupt officials involved?" Danielle raised a hand, a simple gesture that commanded immediate silence. Her voice, amplified by the sudden quiet, carried across the room. "Ladies and gentlemen of the press, what you have witnessed today is just the beginning. For 18 months, the Federal Bureau of Investigation has been meticulously gathering evidence against a pervasive network of corruption within this city's law enforcement. Sergeant Davies, Detectives Miller, and Hayes were key figures in this criminal enterprise, actively obstructing justice and preying on the very communities they swore to protect." She paused, allowing her words to sink in. "Their attempt to frame me, the director of the FBI, was a desperate, arrogant act of self-preservation. It was a brazen attempt to silence an investigation that was closing in on them. They underestimated the resolve of federal law enforcement, and they underestimated the power of truth." Her eyes swept across the reporters, conveying a message of unwavering determination. "Let this be a clear message to anyone who believes they are above the law, especially those in positions of public trust. The FBI will root out corruption wherever it festers. This investigation is far from over. We will follow every lead, expose every accomplice, and bring every perpetrator to justice. There will be no leniency, no compromise." Her words were met with a fresh flurry of flashes and a renewed surge of questions. This was a national story unfolding live, a dramatic revelation that would dominate headlines for weeks. The narrative of Danielle Ross, the criminal, had been shattered, replaced by the powerful image of Danielle Ross, the relentless federal agent. Even before she finished speaking, news channels were already running breaking reports, their chyrons screaming, "FBI director goes undercover," and "corrupt cops arrested in court." One, the city's mayor, caught completely off guard, issued a hastily worded statement suspending several high-ranking police officials pending internal and federal investigations. The police chief, a man widely believed to be complicit in the corrupt network, was immediately placed on administrative leave, his office sealed by federal agents within minutes of the courtroom revelation. Public trust in the local police force, already fragile, plummeted to an all-time low. Calls for widespread reform erupted across social media and local news outlets. Danielle allowed her agents to gently guide her out of the media frenzy as she exited the courtroom. Another group of FBI agents, armed with warrants, were already moving towards the district attorney's office, preparing to seize records and question staff. The swift, coordinated actions left no doubt about the extensive planning behind this operation. The public exposure in the courtroom was just the tip of the iceberg, designed to create maximum shock and leverage the element of surprise. The city was in an uproar. Protests were already forming outside the police precinct, demanding accountability and justice. The once untouchable facade of local law enforcement had been ripped away, exposing a festering wound of deceit and abuse. Danielle had not only cleared her name, she had ignited a firestorm of public outrage and initiated a systemic overhaul. The power had not just shifted, it had been decisively seized, and the momentum was building, pushing relentlessly towards a deeper reckoning. The city was a raw nerve, vibrating with the fallout from the courtroom revelation. Danielle Ross, no longer bound by the masquerade of a defendant, moved with a newfound relentless drive. The orange suit was gone, replaced by the sharp lines of a dark, authoritative power suit, befitting her true rank. Operation Clean Sweep, as the media had dubbed it, was no longer just a tagline, it was a living, breathing federal machine dismantling years of entrenched corruption. From the secured command center established within the federal courthouse, Danielle directed the sprawling investigation. Subpoenas were served by the hundreds, their legal weight crushing decades of illicit dealings. Arrest became a daily spectacle. The police chief, a man who had built his career on a facade of civic duty, was taken from his sprawling suburban estate, his face a mask of bitter disbelief as federal agents led him away. Captains and lieutenants from internal affairs, officers who had actively suppressed evidence and protected their corrupt brethren, were caught mid-shred, their attempts to destroy damning records thwarted by swift federal action. Every arrest, every seized document, every confiscated encrypted device was a new data point, a new piece of the intricate, sickening puzzle. Danielle maintained a strict control over the flow of information. Daily press briefings, delivered with a detached precision, fueled the public's thirst for justice. Each revelation was a calculated strike, designed to maintain pressure and expose the depth of the rot. A leaked internal memo detailing protection payments to a city councilman, an audio recording of a district attorney's aide instructing officers to tamper with evidence. The public was outraged, their trust in local institutions eroding with each new headline. The media, a relentless entity, became an extension of the FBI's public information campaign, broadcasting every raid, every perp walk, every public statement. Protests outside the main police precinct swelled daily, a growing tide of public anger demanding accountability. Danielle, however, saw beyond the immediate arrests. She knew the true architects of the system often operated from the deepest shadows. Her focus was on the financial tentacles, the flow of illicit funds that underpin the entire criminal enterprise. Federal forensic accountants, brought in from specialized units, worked around the clock, tracing complex money laundering schemes, untangling webs of shell corporations and offshore accounts. During a late-night review of the financial data, a pattern began to emerge, subtle yet undeniable. A series of seemingly disparate, legitimate-looking businesses, all owned by various arrested officials or their known associates, consistently routed their profits through a single, opaque international holding company. The company's name, Aegis Holdings, was innocuous, almost generic, but its address led to a high-rise office in a notoriously discreet financial district in a distant, uncooperative jurisdiction. Further digging revealed that Aegis Holdings was ultimately controlled by a seemingly legitimate, yet highly secretive, legal firm known as Blackwood and Thorne, a firm with a reputation for handling the affairs of the ultra-wealthy and ethically ambiguous. This was the breakthrough. Blackwood and Thorne rarely appeared on any public radar, operating in a clandestine world of corporate secrecy. Their clientele was exclusively high-profile and highly protected. This wasn't just a legal firm, it was a conduit, a shield for the truly powerful. This connection pointed not to low-level street corruption, but to the systemic architects, the masterminds who had insulated themselves with layers of legal obfuscation. These were the true puppeteers, and their anonymity had just been shattered. Danielle knew this was the vital thread, the one that would lead her to the heart of the spider's web. The momentum had not just been maintained, it was accelerating, pushing her and her team towards the ultimate confrontation with the unseen forces that had orchestrated the city's corruption for decades. The stakes had never been higher, and the path to justice had just become immeasurably more dangerous. The real fight had truly begun. The city shuddered, a live wire exposed. Danielle Ross, no longer just a director but a force of reckoning, drove Operation Clean Sweep with surgical precision. Her dark suits were not just attire, they were armor. The federal courthouse, a fortress now, became the epicenter of a storm designed to purify. Every dawn brought new raids, subpoenas, thick as phone books, landed like precision strikes, ripping through the city's corrupt foundation. Arrest became ritualistic. The police chief, once an untouchable icon, was dragged from his manicured lawn, his protests swallowed by the whir of news choppers. Captains and lieutenants from internal affairs, caught literally mid-shredding documents, were cuffed, their desperate attempts to erase evidence futile against the FBI's relentless advance. Each arrest was a victory. Each seized hard drive a trove of damning secrets, painting a mosaic of systemic rot. Danielle controlled the narrative with an iron fist. Daily press briefings, stark and unyielding, fed the public's insatiable hunger for justice. Each revealed detail was a calculated explosion, a wiretapped phone call, detailing a bribe from a city councilman, a leaked email exposing a district attorney's aide ordering evidence tampering. Public trust evaporated. The media, a ravenous beast, amplified every federal move, every perp walk, every terse statement. Protests outside the main precinct swelled into a roaring tide, a collective demand for accountability. But Danielle hunted bigger game. The foot soldiers were falling, but the puppeteers remained. Her focus narrowed to the intricate financial trails, the invisible arteries of corruption. Elite federal forensic accountants, working in a sterile, silent room, untangled serpentine money laundering schemes, dissecting layers of shell corporations and offshore accounts. They worked in shifts, fueled by coffee and a shared grim determination. It was during one such late-night session, the hum of servers the only sound, that a pattern, subtle but undeniable, finally emerged, a network of seemingly disparate businesses, all tied to the recently arrested or their close associates, consistently channeled their illicit gains through a single, inconspicuous international holding company. The name, Aegis Holdings, was bland, almost deliberately forgettable, but its registered address led to a high-rise in a notoriously secretive financial haven, a jurisdiction infamous for its impenetrable corporate veils. Further digging, deep dives into obscure global corporate registries, peeled back the final layer. Aegis Holdings was a mere front, ultimately controlled by a legal entity known only as Blackwood and Thorne. The name itself was a whisper in the global financial underworld, a firm known only to the ultra-wealthy and those operating beyond the scrutiny of conventional law. They were the architects of anonymity, the masters of legal obfuscation. They didn't just bend laws, they exploited their very blind spots. This was it, the true orchestrators, not street-level thugs or greedy bureaucrats, but highly sophisticated, powerful individuals operating from the shadows, insulated by layers of legal protection and financial engineering. Their anonymity, once absolute, had just been shattered. Danielle felt a cold rush of adrenaline. This was the thread, the one that would lead her to the heart of the spider's web, to the very nexus of the city's long-standing corruption. The momentum of Operation Clean Sweep had not just been maintained, it was accelerating, pushing her and her team into a final, deadly confrontation with the unseen forces that had choked the city for decades. The real fight, the dangerous one, had only just begun. The coordinates for the raid were set a nondescript office in a glittering high-rise in a renowned international financial haven. This was where Blackwood and Thorne operated, a legal firm that specialized in obscuring wealth and enabling financial secrecy. Often for illicit purposes, they were masters of navigating legal loopholes and exploiting variations in international laws, making them a conduit for wealth that sought to escape scrutiny. Danielle stood before her elite team of FBI agents and federal prosecutors, their faces hardened with resolve. The room was dark, illuminated only by the glow of multiple screens displaying maps, financial charts, and photos of Blackwood and Thorne's key partners. "Today, we cut the head off the snake," Danielle stated, her voice calm but resonant with controlled fury. Blackwood and Thorne are not just lawyers. They are the architects of the criminal enterprise that has plagued this city and countless others. They have systematically shielded corrupt officials, laundered billions, and operated with complete impunity. She gestured to the largest screen, which showed a live satellite feed of the target building. "Our intelligence indicates that the senior partners, including the elusive Marcus Thorne and Eleanor Blackwood, are currently on site for a sensitive client meeting. This is our window. We go in fast. We go in hard. No warnings, no negotiation. We seize every piece of data, every document, every digital footprint. We pull back every layer of their legal and financial obfuscation. The team, composed of financial crimes experts, cyber forensics specialists, and tactical agents, moved with military precision. They boarded a specially configured federal jet, bypassing standard international protocols through high-level diplomatic channels Danielle had personally opened. Hours later, under the cloak of a pre-dawn sky, the team landed in the bustling city, moving swiftly to the target high-rise. The lobby was sleek, minimalist, guarded by an equally sleek security team. But they were no match for the coordinated federal assault. In a blur of motion, agents breached the main entrance, their vests emblazoned with FBI, their weapons raised. The private security, caught completely off guard, quickly surrendered. The building's alarm system, designed to detect unauthorized entry, was neutralized within seconds by the cyber team, who simultaneously initiated a lockdown of all internal network access points. Danielle led the charge to the top floor. The silence in the elevator was palpable, a coil of contained energy. As the doors hissed open on the executive floor, a scene of hushed opulence greeted them: polished marble, abstract art, and hushed private offices. But the quiet was deceptive. Behind one heavy, soundproof door, they heard voices, low and urgent. "This is the FBI," Danielle's voice boomed as tactical agents breached the door. The room inside was a lavish boardroom, dominated by a long mahogany table. Around it sat a handful of impeccably dressed individuals, their faces a mixture of shock and disdain. Among them, Danielle immediately recognized Marcus Thorne, a man with cold, calculating eyes, and Eleanor Blackwood, whose sharp features were now contorted in disbelief. Both were notorious in whispers of the financial elite, their names synonymous with untraceable wealth and impenetrable legal defenses. Thorne, ever the strategist, recovered first. "This is an outrage. You have no jurisdiction here. This is a private legal firm, engaged in privileged client communications." He rose, his voice shaking with indignation, attempting to assert a power he no longer held. Danielle stepped forward, her voice cutting through his bluster. "Jurisdiction, Mr. Thorne. Your firm has facilitated criminal enterprises that directly impact U.S. national security and public trust. That grants us all the jurisdiction we need. This private legal firm is a criminal nexus, and that privileged client communication is likely evidence of racketeering, money laundering, and obstruction of justice." She held up a tablet displaying a complex financial diagram with Aegis Holdings at its core, directly linked to Blackwood and Thorne and then fanning out to numerous illicit transactions. "This is just a fraction of what we have. Your meticulously crafted anonymity. Mr. Thorne is over." Eleanor Blackwood, colder and more composed than Thorne, attempted a subtle move towards a large, ornate shredder in the corner. "You have no proof. Everything we do is within the bounds of international law." "Really, Ms. Blackwood," Danielle countered, a grim smile touching her lips. "Because while you were busy shredding documents, our cyber team was busy mirroring your entire server. Every file, every email, every privileged communication. We have it all." As if on cue, one of the FBI cyber agents held up a captured, encrypted server drive, its indicator light blinking. Blackwood's face fell, a mask of utter defeat. Her arrogance, like Thorne's, shattered. "Marcus Thorne and Eleanor Blackwood," Danielle announced first, her voice echoing the gravity of the moment. "You are under arrest for conspiracy, money laundering, and operating a criminal enterprise. Anything you say can and will be used against you." The tactical agents moved in, cuffing the stunned partners and their associates. Thorne continued to protest, but his words were hollow, devoid of their former power. Blackwood remained silent, her eyes darting around the room, acknowledging the absolute, irreversible loss of control. The other clients in the room, clearly implicated, also found themselves under federal arrest. The takedown of Blackwood and Thorne sent a shockwave through the global financial underworld. News of the raid spread like wildfire, a clear message that no one, regardless of their perceived untouchability or their use of complex legal shields, was beyond the reach of justice. Danielle Ross, once framed and almost publicly disgraced, had not only cleared her name, but had systematically dismantled a vast criminal network, exposing the rot at its highest levels. She had become more than just the FBI director. She was a symbol of relentless resistance against corruption, a beacon of hope for communities long exploited. The city, and indeed the world, watched as the powerful fell and justice finally began to prevail. The raid on Blackwood and Thorn echoed globally, a seismic tremor through the gilded cages of illicit finance. The immediate aftermath was a torrent of data, a digital avalanche that buried the last vestiges of the corrupt network. The mirrored servers of Blackwood and Thorn yielded a treasure trove of evidence, encrypted client lists, detailed transaction logs, shell company schematics, and explicit communications outlining the complex web of bribery, money laundering, and influence peddling. It was irrefutable proof of a sophisticated criminal enterprise, not just a law firm. Danielle Ross, now a figure of international renown, oversaw the painstaking process of sifting through the digital mountain. The data confirmed the pervasive reach of the network, connecting not only the arrested police chief and the former prosecutor, but also high-ranking officials in other cities, international drug cartels, and even a few seemingly legitimate philanthropic organizations used for tax evasion and further laundering. Blackwood and Thorn had been the central nervous system, coordinating and protecting a vast criminal empire. The public outcry was immense. The daily news cycle became a continuous expose of the inner workings of systemic corruption. Citizens across the nation watched in disbelief as respected public figures were unmasked as complicit in a vast criminal conspiracy. The initial shock gave way to a powerful wave of demand for justice and widespread reform. Danielle leveraged this momentum with strategic precision. She worked directly with the Department of Justice to establish a specialized national task force, Operation Aegis Disruption, specifically targeting similar legal conduits for organized crime. This initiative quickly became a model for federal intervention in deep-seated local corruption, drawing lessons from the Blackwood and Thorn takedown. Back in her home city, the systemic changes were immediate and sweeping. The entire local police force underwent a federally mandated review, leading to mass resignations and further arrests. A new police chief, vetted by the FBI and with a mandate for transparency, was appointed. Independent oversight committees, long championed by community activists but consistently stonewalled by the old regime, were finally established with full federal backing. New laws were drafted and fast-tracked through the state legislature, designed to enhance whistleblower protections, increase financial transparency for public officials, and strengthen anti-corruption measures. Danielle herself became more than just the FBI director. She became a symbol. Her image, once plastered on news screens as a supposed criminal, was now celebrated as a relentless crusader. She delivered keynote speeches at legal conferences, testified before congressional committees on police reform, and was featured in countless documentaries detailing her extraordinary undercover operation. Her quiet resolve and unwavering commitment to justice inspired a generation, particularly women of color, who saw in her a powerful example of integrity and defiance against seemingly insurmountable odds. The original corrupt officers, Davies, Miller, and Hayes, along with the former police chief and the district attorney's aide, faced the full weight of federal prosecution. Their trials were swift, the evidence against them overwhelming. Thanks to the data extracted from Blackwood and Thorn, they received lengthy sentences, their last vestiges of power and influence utterly stripped away. The ironic twist of being outmaneuvered by the very woman they sought to publicly disgrace became a bitter legacy for them. Months later, with the dust beginning to settle, Danielle stood on the steps of the federal courthouse, now a place synonymous with her triumph. The public, a respectful crowd, had gathered, not for sensationalism, but for gratitude. The air was cleaner, metaphorically and literally, as the city began its slow, painful process of healing and rebuilding trust. A young woman approached her, her eyes filled with awe. "Director Ross," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "Thank you. You showed us that even when the system seems broken, one person can still make a difference." Danielle smiled, a rare, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "It's never just one person," she replied, her gaze sweeping across the faces in the crowd. "It's about knowing when to act and trusting that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, will always find its way to the surface." She had brought down an empire of corruption, not through flashy heroics, but through calculated defiance and unwavering resolve. Her journey from framed criminal to national symbol was complete, a testament to the enduring power of justice in the face of overwhelming odds. The fight was far from over, but she had opened the eyes of a nation, proving that resistance, when executed with precision and courage, could indeed become a revolution.